Good afternoon. Please mute your phones and we will get started here in 1 minute. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to those across Northwest Ohio. Please feel free to enter into the chat box where you're located across the great Northwest. And of course, any questions along the way, please submit those to the chat box as we will have time to wrap up and conclude with those questions from each of you. So appreciate that. My name is Pete Lupiva on staff with the Ohio Office of Budget and Management Communications. Join us today are leaders from the budget and grants sections of OBM with us online and across Northwest Ohio, as today's participants are analysts and experts, township and village fiscal officers, city treasurers, county auditors, and the like, who make up the true mosaic of Ohio's public finance profession. Welcome to this Northwest Regional Finance Summit, colleagues. Next slide, please. The Ohio Office of Budget and Management, a cabinet-level agency within the executive branch of Ohio's state government. Kimberly Murnix, the director of OBM, sits on the governor's cabinet as the chief financial officer. The mission of OBM is to provide financial management and policy analysts to help ensure the responsibility of all state resources and the stewardship thereof. Since Kimberly Murnix became OBM's director in 2019, OBM has provided more support to our local public finance leaders across Ohio. Next slide, please. Detailed local supports and state reports are available and online as references and resources to each of you. This includes the monthly financial report that go directly to the governor, legislature, and everyday citizens. Please log on to the OBM website at any point to see many of these reports and resources by logging on to obm.ohio.gov. Next slide, please. The Ohio Checkbook serves as the singular and most trusted resource for Ohioans to obtain both local and state financial information. Checkbook is a result of a joint initiative from two first-of-their-kind sites, the ohiocheckbook.com and OBM's Interactive Budget. The collective effort enhances government transparency by providing real-time state financial and transactional data as partnered between OBM, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor, and the Office of the Treasurer of State. Users can view online government spending as well as how revenue is allocated. Logging on to Ohio Checkbook is as easy as ohiocheckbook.gov. Next slide, please. Joining us today is the Deputy Director of the State Budget, Mr. Dan Baker, who is originally from Northwest Ohio. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pete. You stole my thunder a little bit there. It is a pleasure to be with you and be back home virtually. Originally from Seneca County, but I'm glad to be here to go over current budget updates. So, as most of you probably know, Ohio, the state fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So it is, not a calendar year that most of you use or does not match up with the federal government. So we are currently in fiscal year 21. So I'll start to talk a little bit about our FY21 revenues that we're seeing, and then I will go into our planning for fiscal years 22 and 23, which we'll have to introduce the operating budget here in a little less than 3 weeks. Obviously, COVID has presented a lot of challenges, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it really is. We are in unprecedented circumstances, and I think the state budget or our revenue update will talk about that. But first, next slide, please. This is a chart that kind of shows one of the challenges that Ohio is facing. The yellow line at the top is the Ohio population from 25 to 65, so that's the working age population. And then the orange line is the employment number of employed Ohioans. And this is important, particularly for Ohio from the state perspective. This is one of the challenges we face in with the rating agencies, so Moody's and Fitch, et cetera. We have, over the last couple of years, really tried to get the highest rating, but this is one of the things that they point to, and frankly, most of our the criteria and the scoring that they give us would allow us to have the highest rating, but this is what they always point to, that our working age population is declining and our state population is getting older. This and a historical reliance on the manufacturing sector are really the knocks against us that are holding us back from getting the highest rating with the financial agencies. And this is one challenge that we all have to face as Ohioans is how do we change this trajectory and get more people, more young people, and more people in the workforce going forward. Next slide, please. So what I'm about to go over, all of this information is available on our monthly financial report. The next slide kind of tells you where to go, but it is on our website, www.obm.ohio.gov. And then there are tabs at the top. It's reports and budgets. And then there's a tab for the monthly financial report. This information is released every month on or around December 10th, or I'm sorry, the 10th of the month. In this case, it was January 10th, and looking back to December revenues. I say on or around because if the 10th falls on a weekend, then it's usually the Monday after. So, we are, I guess, technically not considered to be in a recession because we've not had 2 declining quarters. But, we are certainly in an economic slowdown. However, the receipts that we are seeing, have really surprised us and are not really reflective of that, as you normally think in a recessionary period, which is why I said we're in unprecedented times. The sales tax is noted there. Ohio, our sales tax is broken into 2 categories: non-auto and then auto. So basically, motor vehicles and everything else. Non-auto sales tax for the month of December was 41.9 or 4.8% above estimate. And for the year, we are 251 million or 5.2% above estimate. The auto sales tax was 7.7 million above estimate for December, or 6.2. And for the year, we are 105 million or 13.5% above estimate. And as I stated earlier, the state fiscal year begins on July 1st, so this represents half a year of revenues. So we're halfway through the fiscal year at this point. What we've seen in the sales tax is a couple of things going on. One, and I'm sure some of you, especially on the county level, are seeing this as well. Given the social distancing and certain segments of the economy being locked down, we have seen individual behavior change. The sales tax in the state of Ohio, very basically, we tax things, but we don't tax activities. So this has actually oddly been advantageous for the state sales tax because people's behavior, in lockdown, folks have been doing a lot of, home improvements. Myself, we've gotten new carpet in our house, and we got a new couch, both of which are taxable events. One of the concerts that we were supposed to go to did not happen. We didn't go to any movies this year, both of which are non-taxable events. So it is those types of things: sporting events, concerts, movies, activities that aren't taxable, and instead people are spending their money on home improvements, which are taxable. The furniture, the carpet, the roofing, any number of things. So, and also, one other thing that we've seen is if you've tried to buy a bicycle or a kayak this summer, running shoes, those types of things, people have been outdoors and doing activities more. So there were a lot of shortages in those types of goods, particularly bikes. I know I tried to buy one for my son and it was very difficult to find one. So again, that's a shift from, non-taxable activities to buying things that are taxable, which has helped Ohio's bottom line. The other thing that I want to bring up in the sales tax is Ohio traditionally is a net exporter of travel or tourists, right? Ohioans generally go to Myrtle Beach or to Disneyland or to New York City or internationally traveling. And given the shutdowns around the world and travel bans, we haven't been able to do that. So a lot of folks have been staying at home and either spending money on local vacations, maybe going down to Hocking Hills or, Lake Erie, and so we're spending that money here. Other folks who haven't traveled or just, maybe they haven't gone anywhere, but they've got money that they've either saved or, as I said earlier, invested in other things. So that's another thing that we've seen, that people are spending money here. One concern that we do have on this is, to a certain extent, that we might be borrowing from the future. There are only so many couches a person needs, or home improvements, and have these events just been sped up. I think that there is something to be said for that, and that is something that we are thinking about and looking at in our sales tax revenues in the next biennium. But also I think that most people, if they have money in their pocket, they're going to spend it somehow. And if they spend it on taxable goods, then we won't have borrowed from the future. But it is something to keep in mind. The other piece that I wanted to bring up, two more large pieces, are the state income tax. So the personal income tax for the month was about 5.4 million above estimate, or 0.7%. For the year, it's 75 million, or 1.5% above estimate. And this does take into account the shift of the income tax filing deadline from April to July, which for us moved it from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. So that is already factored in. So this 75 million for the year is above the money that came in from an unexpected filing deadline change. And this is strange. During the Great Recession, if I recall, state income tax revenues fell 10% year over year in, I think, 2009, and then another 7% in 2010. So over the 2 years, it was an over 17% drop in tax revenue. And the second quarter decline that we had, in this national GDP was well over 30%, much bigger than the Great Recession, and yet we're doing okay on income tax. And at least part of this is related to the unequal way this economic downturn has affected workers. If you break it into thirds, most of the economic impact falls on folks in the lowest third. Their income has dropped. The middle third, they've dropped a little bit, but basically they're on target. And the top third actually have seen their incomes go up slightly. And a lot of that is because folks like myself and a lot of people on this call are able to work from home. We have the luxury of continuing to work. We just moved from our offices to our homes and created home offices, and we're able to have events like this call, which a year ago would have been in person, but we've adjusted and we're able to continue to do the work and have these conversations just virtually. Unfortunately, folks in the restaurant industry and other service industries don't have that luxury, particularly in the hotel industry, and others have been really hard hit. And so, unlike the Great Recession, where you saw, a lot of bankers losing their jobs and Lehman Brothers and others closing, you haven't really seen that this time. And so, it is really kind of localized on lower income workers, and that's, for those who have heard the term, the K-shaped recovery, that's where that comes in. How that applies to the state income tax is, in the last budget, there was a tax change that it eliminated the state income tax burden for individuals making less than approximately $22,000. So the state doesn't tax those people on income. So predominantly, if a lot of the people laid off are making less than $22,000 a year, that won't affect state tax revenue. As I said, this was just done a little over 2 years ago, or I'm sorry, a little less than 2 years ago. And so we didn't have this experience in the Great Recession. So the unique circumstances of Ohio not taxing, really low income folks, and those people bearing the brunt of this economic downturn have left the personal income tax for the state relatively unscathed. Other things that help, on the federal level, the stimulus that affects individuals helps state tax revenues more than, other broader based stimulus. So, for example, the personal or the stimulus checks that individuals are getting and the extended unemployment, those are both things that help Ohio, because we have such a reliance on the sales tax and the income tax. That type of stimulus helps our bottom line as well. One last note I would bring up in terms of state tax revenues, it's a little odd, is that our cigarette tax is 38% or 38 million above estimate, or almost 10% above our estimate. So apparently people are staying home and smoking more. But that's basically the 21 picture. In terms of the upcoming state budget, as I mentioned, we need to have the budget in place by July 1st. The governor is required by statute to introduce his budget 4 weeks after the General Assembly convenes, which this year is February 1st. That date floats each 2 years because the General Assembly is required to convene the first Monday that is not a holiday in January. Therefore, that changes every 2 years. So our budget deadline changes every 2 years. But this year it is February 1st, which is a little less, it's 19 days away. It is 3 weeks from last Monday. So we will be required to introduce a blue book to the General Assembly, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with and will be available on our OBM website. And then later that week, the Director Burnix, will go in front of the House and present testimony to the House Finance Committee. Probably a week or two after that, the actual budget will be introduced as legislation in the House, which is where the budget traditionally starts. In terms of where we are in putting together a budget, we started in July of 2020, sending guidance out to state agencies in building their budgets, their budget requests. They then submitted them to OBM in October. It was a staggered date, so not everybody submitted them in October, but at which time we began reviewing the agency requests, making our recommendations, building a budget. Simultaneously, we were also trying to estimate the revenues for 22 and 23, the state tax revenues, as well as Medicaid caseloads. And we put all those things together and currently are trying to put a basic framework together and then get decisions made to finalize the bill so that we have something to introduce on the 7th. So that's currently where we are. We're in the finalizing the revenues and estimates, putting them into a framework to see how much revenue or the available resources we have, and then how we want to expend those resources. So that's where we are at this time. And like I said, in 19 days, this will all become public. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the link. This shows you how to get to the monthly financial report, which comes out every day or every month on the 10th or soon thereafter. It's obm.ohio.gov. Click on budget and planning, click on monthly financial reports, and that'll take you there. And that is all I have. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dan. Next slide, please. In December of 2019, Governor Mike DeWine convened his cabinet outside the State House for the very first time over in the Mahoning Valley. During that same week, OBM Director Kimberly Murnix hosted a roundtable of local fiscal officials like those of us online here today. One of the key results of this session was the CFO Newsflash e-newsletter, implemented on the state level and a crucial and relevant tool to conduct the work of public finance, and that a local government's version was needed and an ideal communication to across the Ohio, beyond Mahoning Valley, and our colleagues. So the Ohio Connects e-newsletter includes practical content and timely information on Ohio financial news. If you're not already signed up through OBM and our statewide fiscal associations, please consider doing so by logging on to the OBM website. Now, I'd like to introduce our Chief of the Ohio Grants Partnership, Stacy Massey, here at OBM. Stacy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Pete. Can we go to the next slide? So I want to talk about the Ohio Grants Partnership. This was a group that was put together. It was in the making prior to the pandemic, but I think the group kind of formalized as soon as the pandemic hit and a lot of grant opportunities and funding started coming out of legislation. So we started with a team of 2 and now we're a team of 7. And on this team, let's go to the next slide. Really our goal as a team is to help the overall Ohio grants community. So our vision is being the leading resource for the Ohio grants community to help build the capacity of its partners to successfully apply for and manage grant programs. We recognize that many of you have just maybe recently received grant funding for the first time, and that or occasionally get grant funding if there happens to be a disaster that comes through your community. And so you're not really equipped to keep on top of grant regulations, nor should you be, because you have other responsibilities. Grants kind of takes the sideline. And then when they come along, people are kind of trying to figure out and find their way. And so what our team is here to do is to kind of be that resource to you. And I'll show you a few things on our website that we've built, but to be that resource to help you navigate that process on finding grants if maybe you have a gap or a need. to help apply for grants, to help you manage your grants. And then we have, since we've kind of geared up in the last, since the pandemic, when as a team with larger staffing, been running or helping with the local government coronavirus relief funding. So we're helping manage those funds and a couple other programs that were with the coronavirus relief funding. We're doing the reporting to the U.S. Treasury. So I know that may be the funding source that you're dealing with now. So you may be working with our team now as you navigate the changing requirements by the U.S. Treasury and trying to, expend those funds appropriately. But one of our other goals is we want to maximize the amount that comes into the state. And from a statewide perspective, we want to try to be more efficient, more transparent and accountable. And through efficiency, we want more money to go towards the program effort and less for the administrative burden. And we want to help all of the locals kind of realize that as well, if there's ways that we can help with best practices and such. But that's kind of our overall vision and our mission. And one of our really key cornerstones to our mission is to help assist the local grants community. So that's kind of why we're here today. Let's go to the next slide. So on our website, this is one of the things that we've stood up pretty early on, and we continue to try to put more information on this. And as time goes along, this should be a better resource than it already is now. But at grants.ohio.gov, we have a lot of links that can help you get information or access to grants information, where before you may have had to have known someone or know where to find information. We kind of pull it all together so you don't have to do all of that digging or Googling or research. We have DUNS information on how to get one, a step-by-step process, how to get a DUNS number, how to register that with the SAM. Grants training, we've done some grants training. I think initially at the very beginning of the pandemic, we did one recognizing a lot of local governments would be getting grant funding maybe for the first time. Just kind of a grants 101 on what you need to know in managing funds. That it may, you may have already expended a lot of those funds at this point. I know there is still FEMA dollars that are continuing to flow. There may be, who knows, if Congress passes another package, there may be more local money. So it never hurts to kind of have kind of a high level idea on how you want to be prepared in managing grants. So we have that training, and you can take it at any time or view it at any time. Funding opportunities and links to agency sites. I'm going to show some details on how that was built out on the site here in a few slides. But really, our website just contains all the information that we can think of that you may need just to kind of help point you in the right direction. However, we do have a lot of links right now for coronavirus relief funding. So on our site, you can find anything where you've received coronavirus relief funding either through our office, through the counties, or even if you've received a direct allocation or from a county that received a direct allocation. You can still, some of the resources are still good. So we have the guidance document for the funding. We have links to the U.S. Treasury guidance and frequently asked questions. We have CRF presentations that we've done in the past, a guide to subgranting funds, which that's a really helpful guide that even beyond the coronavirus relief funding, if you're ever in a position where you need to make a subgrant of federal funds to someone, this guide walks you through the process and what a notice of award should look like and what are the elements that should be in it, actually as an example at the back. So we've used this guide, although it was created for coronavirus relief funding because a lot of folks were subgranting money as the timeline was starting to approach. We have used this guide with other folks who have asked questions about subgranting that wasn't related to coronavirus relief funding, so it can apply for all funds. So it's available out there. Also, there's a guide or like a little couple pager on eligible use examples for the funding if you still have some remaining funds and you need some ideas. Let's go to the next slide. So back in September, we had originally planned to do an in-person session in June, and that got postponed and then eventually moved to virtual when the pandemic began. And so we still wanted to have this full day event. So what it was is we had decided that it would be good to do kind of an all-day grants summit, and we called it the Ohio Grants Summit. and bringing together some information that can help local governments and those that receive not-for-profits, those that receive funding from the state, kind of to start to navigate the process. And we had many sessions, the Ohio Broadband Strategy, leveraging census data. Also, we had another session from Ohio Emergency Management Agency Recovery Branch talking about disaster funding, especially during the pandemic. So many of these sessions were actually planned prior to the pandemic, and it just so happened they were really applicable during. And so we switched to a virtual session in September. It was actually live streamed on the Ohio channel and was recorded, and those recordings are now available on our website. If you missed it and didn't get signed on, you can go back and look at those recordings. There's two, I think, recordings, one for the first half of the day and one for the second half, and then all the slide presentations are available as well. So if you did miss the Ohio Grant Summit, you'll want to go back and maybe scroll through and see some of the sessions. I know the leveraging census data and applying for grants was, I think, the top rated session of the day. We had someone from the US Census Bureau talking about tools that you can use and where you can find them that are available online to help you get information and data that can strengthen your grants application process, and if you're building a grants application. So we plan to have another grant summit probably late summer, early fall. It most likely will be virtually. I think it's nice to be in person because we get the interaction. We had also planned if we were in person, we'd have other state agencies there so you could talk and ask questions kind of offline. However, I do think the virtual does help, so you don't have the travel to Columbus for the day, and it's able, you really kind of come and go as you please on certain topics. So there may be 2 or 3 topics that interest you. So if it's virtual, it's much easier to kind of log in, log out. So I think there's pros and cons, but I'm thinking that it'd probably be virtual this year, and we're starting to put that together as we speak. So stay tuned for more information on that in the coming months. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the things I wanted to kind of point out is to make sure that you're always prepared for federal opportunities. So when the coronavirus relief funding came out, there were a lot of local governments that were a little bit taken back by having to get a DUNS number and then get it registered with SAM. Many were struggling through the process. The US Treasury at the very beginning was requiring this of subrecipients, which became very difficult because I think that a lot of folks across the nation were trying to get a DUNS number and get it registered at the same time. And the federal system, even on a good day, doesn't work well with just getting it quickly. So it's normally a 15-day business day process on a normal time when there isn't a large rush for folks to get the number and get it registered. So one of my recommendations, because US Treasury did kind of come back and say, well, it's not required. However, if Congress does pass another package and if there is additional funding that becomes available to locals, I would think you would want to be poised and ready to accept that, because it could be the next time around they say they must have a DUNS number and they don't, and they stick to that. So all recipients of federal funds should have a DUNS number registered with SAM. So I wanted to point this out because it's one of the things that it doesn't take too much effort to do. If you do have some issues navigating it, we have instructions on our website at grants.ohio.gov, but you can also contact us. Our email address will be towards the end of this slide presentation. Contact us. We can help walk you through the process. There is a federal help desk you might be able to call, and we can give you that information. But I will reinforce that it is a free process. There are companies out there that will, if they find out that you're trying to get one, will send you email traffic, or if you do already have a DUNS number or you've registered with the SAM and you need to renew it, that's public information. So then they find that out and get your contact information and make it seem like they're part of the federal government or the SAM system trying to help you get renewed and try to charge a fee. So I'm aware of at least 3 companies that do that. I always point that out. It is a free process, and I would hate for any government to pay to accomplish this task where we could help walk you through it. So if you do have any issues with this process, please let us know and we can help you. And there's the link at the end of this slide on where our directions are. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the coronavirus relief funding because a lot of folks in the local space have received funding. We tried to put out as much communication as we could out, but since the funding was kind of distributed through the counties, we only have the information for the folks that have registered with OVM. There are others, I think, that may have gotten funding and still haven't registered with us. So we definitely want to get the word out. One, if you haven't registered with us, please make sure you do. We have that funding opportunity still available so you can fill out a registration and do your reporting. Since that was a requirement of the funding, the auditors state will be auditing these funds. Just even if it's not a single audit, they will be auditing the funds under their normal compliance supplement. So I would recommend that you get registered and get your reporting. If you didn't get the information and you just now haven't done reporting and you need to, we will grant you an extension. We will work with you, but we really want to get everybody kind of up to date and up to speed. So things happen, but just reach out to us. But the timeline was extended to December 31st of 2021. So you have all of that time to spend any remaining funds. Unfortunately, the extension came really late in the game. So if you had any funds remaining, I'm sure you're probably sweating on whether or not you'd have to return those. So good news is you don't. Bad news is you probably could have strategically done something differently if you had known about the extension prior to that. But I think the president signed it between Christmas and New Year. It was maybe the 27th of December. So it was really late. But the partnership is going to start monitoring those use of funds because we're required to do so by the U.S. Treasury. And so you might be getting an email from us soon if you did receive funds. We're using the reporting that was due in January and October as kind of a basis on things that we might just kind of hand select to go out and look at. If you didn't do reporting at all, but we were notified by your county auditor you had received funding, you're probably on our high risk target for monitoring. So there's probably another reason you will want to register and get your reporting caught up. I also wanted to point out that there is a 5-year record retention period of this funding. It is different than most federal funding, which has a 3-year record retention. So if you're not used to receiving federal funds, you're definitely going to want to put aside any documentation, invoices, and purchase orders, and all maybe payroll records, budget records, all of the information that we have on our guidance document that's related to the coronavirus relief funding. You're going to want to put that aside for 5 years, because if it follows your normal record retention, you may dispose of it before that 5-year period, which you would be out of compliance. And at any point in time, we are open to an audit or monitoring from the U.S. Inspector General. So it's very good to kind of keep those records separated at the end of your fiscal year. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about some grant programs that are available to locals, and this is really just a small segment, but I wanted to kind of pull some things together so you could kind of have this on your radar. Let's go to the next slide. So first, here is an example of our website at grants.ohio.gov where you can find funding opportunities. So if you go to the website and you click funding opportunities, let's go to the next slide. You will see that you have a couple selections. So there's open funding opportunities right now, which is if an agency, state agency goes through us to post their opportunity, which right now it's been mostly coronavirus relief or CARES Act funding, it will be available here. However, we do have a link there on the left-hand side where you see it's circled called agency programs. If you click that link, it will take you to a list. If you go to the next slide, that brings up all of the websites that we are aware of where state agencies have shared their grant opportunities. So this is a good starting point if you're kind of perusing what opportunities are available. Eventually, we do hope to have online, when you go to that funding opportunities screen, just to have a list of all available opportunities at a point in time, plus archived opportunities. We do have archived opportunities now, but right as it speaks, we don't have as many folks that have used the funding opportunities other than for the CRF at this point. But as we stand this up and it goes more across the state, there will be more information. But right now we have all of these agency program links. And if you look at it where I highlighted grants.gov, And that's actually a federal site where you can get funding opportunities, but you can go out there and register to get emails kind of pushed to you when opportunities become available. And there are some opportunities that are direct to locals from the federal government. So that might be something you'll want to sign up for. That way you don't have to search every day. It just kind of pushes information to you, and then you can delete that email if you're not interested. But I just wanted to point that out. Let's go to the next slide. So the first example is I just talked about that there are a lot of federal opportunities that are direct to locals. This is one. It's the through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and it's the Assistance to Firefighters Grant. And some of you may have already received this in the past. I know there are some fire departments within the state that have received direct assistance, but this is a competitive program that opens up usually once a year or so through FEMA, and it is available for application. The current period right now, it's actually open, and so the current application period is open through February 12th of 2021. So if you're interested in this program, if you have a fire department and you think, you know, we need critically needed resources every year, AFG has priorities that are assigned to it. So you'll want to go out and see what the priorities are and see if that kind of fits in with what some of your needs are. And you may want to consider applying for it. Like I said, this is direct to FEMA, so it doesn't flow through or pass through the state in any way. But we can help if you get stuck during the application process. There is maybe something that we may be able to assist in the grants team. But I definitely think that you should go out and look at the opportunity if this is something that you may need funding for. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm just going to go through some state agencies where they have some really good links with some information. So this one's the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency's links. So they have 3 programs that seem to be reoccurring that they support local governments. So here's some links here that you could go out and look at if you may be interested. Let's go to the next slide. This is actually a good link right here at the Ohio Department of Transportation. They publish a program resource guide each fiscal year, and it really includes agency transportation infrastructure programs, but it includes programs from Development, Public Works Commission, Ohio Rail Development Commission, and the U.S. Department of Agricultural Rural Development. So this is a great resource. If all of these links, I think this is probably the first one if you have infrastructure needs and are looking for federal or state grant funding for that. I would go to this link and kind of start here. It does point you and give you information, and it points you into some of the right directions for infrastructure programs across the state. Let's go to the next slide. So ODNR, the same. They have a few grants that are eligible for locals, the recreational trails, the volunteer fire assistance, nature works. Here's their site. I would recommend that you also go out to this site and look. I don't, as I speak about all these programs, I don't know that any of them have open application periods, but at least if you get kind of familiar with them and see when they typically have an application period, then you can kind of put it on your calendar and kind of stay up to date with it. So I'm just really trying to connect you to where you can find some information and some programs that may be of assistance to you. Let's go to the next slide. Here again, with Development Services Agency, here's a large list of grants that help support locals. And this link here has every one of these grants that are available, and you can go out to their website and see what the eligibility criteria may be, what the program is all about, and maybe get a sense for when it may be available again. Let's go to the next slide. So the Department of Public Safety has a couple different sections or divisions where funds are available. The Office of Criminal Justice Services just recently had a CARES Act supplemental to their JAG program. I think that has been closed, but that was a recent one. If you go out to their site, they have information about all of their programs, and when there are funding opportunities available, they publish them here. And the Ohio Emergency Management Agency, there's actually the disaster that's currently open for the pandemic has a lot of great information and links on this website here, especially links to FEMA fact sheets, because this has been a complicated disaster, and FEMA has put out a lot of guidance as they've changed course a few times. So if you have already filed for public assistance, you may want to check back to this site. If you haven't filed for public assistance and may think that you have something that could be eligible, this site will link you to the disaster recovery branch at Ohio EMA, and they can let you know if you do have anything that's eligible and you should apply for funding. And that is currently open. And then the Ohio Emergency Management Agency also has a mitigation branch that has other opportunities that are typically reoccurring. A lot of mitigation funding actually flows after disasters, which we've had a few disasters in the state prior to the pandemic that was already being managed, but that then creates mitigation funding. So you'll want to go out to this website and look at current mitigation opportunities, as you may have a project or a safe room project that may be eligible. So you'll want to connect with the mitigation branch at Ohio EMA if you think that you may have some needs, and they can walk you through that process. Next slide. So here is the long-awaited web or email address, so grants@obm.ohio.gov. If you ever have a need for anything, you need to connect with a state agency partner and you don't know where to go or who might run a program, we may not have all the answers right off the bat, but we can definitely search around and try to connect you. That's really our job, is to kind of coordinate and help you navigate the grants process so that you can get all the funding that you need if it's available, and we do the best that we can. So with that, I will turn it back over to Pete, unless there are questions that have come in related to grants.
I do not see any questions at this time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Stacy, and seeing no questions, we got a few more slides here before we wrap for the day. Next slide, please. So as Stacy and Dan both mentioned, if there's anything across the enterprise of state government here in Ohio, please do not hesitate to reach out, whether it be by phone or email. And again, there's the website address. Obviously, Stacy noted the elements for grants and Dan with budget, but don't hesitate to reach out on anything Ohio government related that we can be of help and support to you. Like Stacy noted, we might have the direct answer in that moment, but we hope to get that to you or directly connected with the respective Ohio government element there. Next slide, please. And of course, thank you for joining us today, and please continue this exchange of information and conversation via our 24/7 platforms on social media. And with that, I'll thank you for your attendance and participation, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.